Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today for our AutoCAD user interface enhancements. My name is Lawrence Vaughn, in place for Stan Henning, our business development manager. I'm joined with Michael Calkins. He's our very technical specialist here today that will be doing most of the presentation. And before we get started, I do want to make sure that everyone could hear us before we get too far into the presentation. So if everyone would please raise their hand to let us know that we're coming through clearly. And if you're not sure where that is, that will be on your right-hand task pane, and this pane is where you'll also be typing in your questions throughout the presentation. So it does appear that everyone can hear us just fine, so I'll go ahead and lower everyone's hand. And as you can see now on the screen, this is your task pane to write in the questions, type in your questions throughout the whole entire presentation. And we do encourage them. So if there's something that you want us to repeat or go over to more in depth, or if you have an additional question, we'll find a good time to stop and answer your question. Some questions may need to be answered offline. I'll go ahead and let you know that and send you a private chat and let you know that we'll have to look into it a little further and let you know after the presentation offline.
We don't want to have to admit we don't know in front of everybody else, so we'll send you a private message.
And that's what I meant, yes.
So we definitely encourage questions. This is one of those topics that's a little bit open-ended. We're talking about the AutoCAD user interface. I'm going to be covering some of the new features for the last several versions. I'm going to be presenting 2014, but things have changed, and I know a lot of you out there are using several of the previous versions. So we have a pretty good list of people today. So through that group, there's probably a little bit of everything. So feel free to ask questions, and otherwise I'll just continue talking and we'll monitor the questions. Do want to talk about a couple of events coming up though here real quick. You can always, of course, check our website, CAD-1.com/events. We encourage you to take a look at that. We're trying to keep that really up to date. It shows a lot of the upcoming events and future webinars as well. Those are loaded up pretty routinely. But tonight, this is a pretty interesting one we got coming up. We're co-hosting, or I'm not exactly sure what our title is on this, but we're helping to present this talk from, it's called The Future of BIM Technology and Deliverables. And what we're talking about here is what's going to be going on is this gentleman, Phil Bernstein, who's a fellow of the AIA, American Institute of Architects, and Autodesk Vice President of Strategic Industry Relations. He works for Autodesk, the publisher of AutoCAD and Revit and the other a lot of other applications you're familiar with. Will be presenting tonight at University of Denver at Sturm Hall in the Lindsay Auditorium, and it's free. If you go to our website, CAD-1.com/Bernstein, you can register there. It's just so we can get a good head count. This is basically leading into then the AIA National Convention, which starts then on Thursday of this week. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of this week, the American Institute of Architects National Convention is here in Denver. I don't know if those of you who aren't in the architecture industry probably weren't aware of that, but just want to point this out. If you are attending that, CAD-1 is an exhibitor. We'll be there on the expo floor. I'll be there in attendance, as will Brian Juge, a couple of other techs. So keep an eye out for us there if you are going to attend. All right, so tell you what, let's get into AutoCAD. Let's talk about the actual, what you guys came here to learn about. So my plan for today is to basically walk through the newer features, I'll say, with the ER, because what we're finding here at CAD-1 is that a lot of times people are asking questions. Usually they're not, we don't get tech support calls directly because of the interface. Sometimes there are something kind of a glitch or something that's cropped up. But a lot of times somebody will call, ask a question about an unrelated issue, and they'll say, oh, by the way, could you explain to me how I switched this to do something else? Or I noticed on one of my coworkers, or in the past in an old version, something was a little bit different. And we started talking about that, and we realized, there's a lot of features that have been rolled out incrementally. When Autodesk went to the annual update cycle rather than waiting 4 or 5 years, what happened is they'd roll out these little incremental changes every single year, and they put these little new features links on the start screen, which we all uncheck and say, don't show again. And some of these little features are not getting picked up. They're kind of being missed, and we think some of them are really helpful. Some of them are being kind of pushed on you. They're almost required that you use them, and a lot of you are asking questions. Well, what is it exactly that we need to do to control these? So I was just going to go through a lot of these new features. Some of them might seem really obvious to everybody, but we've had questions, and I want to make sure we discuss them. And sometimes that'll generate questions that you might type in if there's some little feature that you weren't aware of. So I am presenting today with AutoCAD 2014. Hopefully a few of you have started to switch over to 2014. A lot of the enhancements in 2014 were interface-based or focused, not anything too major. But I am showing also the ribbon. I know a lot of people out there are still using the AutoCAD Classic Workspace with the old toolbars, but I really like the ribbon. I really encourage people to use it. So I just want to talk a little bit about some of the features here that we have that maybe you might not or maybe have never been aware of, or maybe might encourage you to go ahead and switch over to using the ribbon interface now. The first one really is the use now of the application menu. And I'm using some of the technical terms here. So the big red A, you notice that they've changed the icon for 2014. Up here in the upper left corner, this is technically called the application menu. And one of the little tricks or tips I like to show off in here is that we have the ability now, because maybe you're just switching to the ribbon, it's not something you've used in the past, and you might be wondering, where did my layout tabs go? Where do my viewport tools go? Well, we now have a layout tab, but you might not realize that that's where the tools got moved to. So you can come here to the application menu, the big red A, and up here at the very top, you'll see your blinking cursor, and that's telling us that you can search for commands here. So if I were to type out, say, viewport, I can see that I get a list of the different commands which use the word viewport in the name. So sometimes it doesn't take us exactly what we want. In this case, I believe the tool is labeled as rectangular. There's rectangle, and there's rectangular for my layout viewport tool. So this little helper up here, it was a big help for me when I started using the ribbon a little bit more in depth, when I started teaching it especially. And then when they move things around, last year they added this layout tab and moved some new tools to that. And I wasn't sure where they went, so I had to do a search up here. This is a big help. Another feature that I'd like to point out is the fact that we can have controls, or we have controls called workspaces, or we can use workspaces to save the way that we have set up our user interface. A lot of us might just work with AutoCAD basically in an out-of-the-box setup. And usually what you'll see is that is the drafting and annotation workspace is the term for these. You'll see it listed. If you're using the quick access toolbar, you'll see it listed here at the top. There's this little gear icon, and you can click that drop down, and we'll get a list of the out-of-the-box workspaces available. There's the drafting and annotation. In 2009 and 10, maybe 11, this was called the 2D drafting and annotation. So if you're using one of those older versions, it's basically the same workspace. We have 3D, a couple of 3D layouts or workspaces, and then there's that AutoCAD Classic, which switches us to the older style of toolbars. Now, you'll see that at the bottom of that list right here, there is this save, or near the bottom, there is the Save Current As option. And what this allows me to do when I click that is to give this workspace a name. Now, what is being saved in this workspace? Well, lots of different things are going to be saved. Let me cancel out of this right now. One of those things that is most obvious here on the screen is that over here on the left-hand side, I have a couple palettes which I have anchored to the left side of my screen. Let me pull one of these out to undock it. And I did this by right-clicking on the title bar of the palette and choosing one of these two options right here, anchor left or anchor right. And I got to make sure, in order for this to work, I have to have allow docking checked. When I right-click on this and say anchor left or right, and you can do this with as many palettes as you might like, the setting, the location of these, either anchored or even if they're floating and you just have auto hide turned on for these palettes, that will get saved into your workspace when you save as and give it a name. The location of those palettes themselves will get saved. The location of the command line will get saved. So those of you who have switched to 2013 or 14 have discovered that there was a floating command line. This is what it's going to look like out of the box. It's going to be kind of docked down here at the bottom of the screen. It's going to be one line. It says type of command, all these little settings here. If you come over to the left-hand side, oh, and for some reason when it's floating, my little e-pointer causes it to disappear. But if you come to the left-hand side, you get this little handlebar here, which allows you to relocate the command line. Now you can move it around. I've actually taken to locating it sometimes at the top of my screen when I'm teaching. But usually, you know, it's one of the things that I'm more comfortable with it docked the way it used to be. So I'll just pull that straight down to the bottom of the screen, and you see it will dock itself into the workspace. And then I can use the little divider bar at the top to change the number of lines of prompt history. So the location of your command line and the number of lines of prompt history, those will also get saved into your workspace. So 2 or 3 is usually pretty good for me depending on the type of work I'm doing. So I'll locate that down there. The location of your quick access toolbar up here at the top of the screen, this can be modified and saved into the workspace. A lot of people don't know this, but right there, there's a little tiny button at the end of the quick access toolbar. When you click that down arrow, you'll see down here, not only can you turn on and off some of the tools that are in the quick access toolbar by default, you can come down here to the bottom and choose this option that says show below the ribbon. And what this does is then move the quick access toolbar down here beneath the ribbon. Now the reason I like this is because A, it gives me just a little bit quicker access to that quick access toolbar. It's a little closer to my work area. And B, now it's opened up a whole lot of space to add tools. I can add tools to my quick access toolbar, which gives me a little bit of a hybridized workspace. Now I can have my ribbon interface, but I can still have a toolbar on which I've placed some of my more frequently used tools. If you like to create custom toolbars, now you can make one really quickly with this quick access toolbar. And the way you might add tools to this, there's the easiest ways is to find the tool on the ribbon which you like to use frequently, and just right-click on it. Right-click, and right there's this option, Add to Quick Access Toolbar. And ta-da, there's my little measuring tool, my little drop-down list with my distance and angle tools. Now, no matter which tab of the ribbon I click on, that tool will remain accessible. A common one I've seen a few times, people will come to the View tab and come over here to the Switch Windows tool. Since this is a nice method for switching among multiple drawings, they might add Switch Windows, especially if you are, and I don't know if you know this, if any of you who are Revit users, you can do the same thing or Quick Access Toolbar. A lot of times people will add Switch Windows to the Quick Access Toolbar in Revit, so now you can do both in AutoCAD and Revit if you use both of the applications. You can also right-click on those once they're on the Quick Access Toolbar and remove them. But you see now I can add a group of tools here. Probably if I get all the way across to the right-hand side, it kind of defeats the purpose of the ribbon in general, but there's just one more customization now that you can take advantage of, placing the Quick Access Toolbar beneath the ribbon and adding additional tools to it. The location of this Quick Access Toolbar will also get saved into the workspace settings when I say Save Current As. There's a few other features, a couple small features that might get saved into the Quick Access Toolbar, or into the workspace. But I'm just going to now that I've made a few changes here, I'm going to go ahead and click the drop down and choose Save Current As here for the new workspace option here. I can also, you've probably noticed this before, that little gear icon is also displayed at the bottom of the screen here. It's the exact same icon. Here when you click on it at the bottom of the screen, you get the same options, including Save Current As. So I'm going to give this a name. Michael's Awesome Workspace. This is very handy too if you share a workstation with some of your coworkers. I know a lot of offices don't necessarily need an installation of AutoCAD on every person's machine. Maybe they have little laptops and they're not powerful enough or whatever, so they'll have a single user in the or station in the office that everybody logs into when they need to use AutoCAD. This is a nice feature because now you can save your workspace. Your coworkers can each save their own workspaces. You don't have to argue over what's the proper way of setting up the workspace. When you sit down, choose your workspace from the list, and then it will restore all those settings. So as I go through, maybe somebody sets up my machine, and they come and they close these palettes over here on the left side. On occasion, AutoCAD, there's a certain set of commands that will cause your quick access toolbar to go back to the top of the screen like this. Sometimes the contextual tabs on the ribbon will cause this. Maybe the command line got floated or something like that. When I want to then restore this back to the way I saved it, I can either, and this is, I don't know if this is by design or if it's kind of a glitch, you can click this drop down at the top of the screen and choose one of these other workspaces like drafting and annotation, and it'll blink for a little bit. Here it comes, and it puts everything back to that drafting annotation sort of out of the box, and then you can switch back to your workspace and it'll switch everything to look like the way you saved it. And that goes a little bit faster. It's on my screen that goes very quickly. The delay there is caused by the webinar software. The other option is if changes are being made. Let me close these guys over here again. And even to display the ribbon, actually, let me change the way that the ribbon displays. A lot of people don't realize if you click that little button right there, you can cycle through different displays of the ribbon. If I come down here to the gear icon at the bottom of the screen, it still says Michael's Awesome Workspace here, but if I go ahead and re-click it, it says it's checked. It says that's what's current, but we can see that it's not. If I go ahead and select it here, it will then restore the workspace as I saved it. For some reason, if you reselect, if you make changes to your workspace, then reselect it from the list right here, it doesn't always work, or it doesn't work at all. You have to switch to a different workspace, then back to your own if you use the drop-down on the quick access toolbar. I believe that's by design. There's a reason for that, but just so you know, sometimes it's just more effective, a little quicker to use the gear icon at the bottom of the screen. So those are the basics of workspaces. I will say there are a few. You might come down here. It's worth looking at these workspace settings options. You can turn on and off. You can uncheck certain workspaces. You could also rename those or you can resave. You can make changes to these anyway. So I'll just say that there is a workspace settings. I won't spend too much time on that because we've got a lot of other stuff I want to cover.
Hey, Michael, we do have a couple questions that came in. One of them is regarding the workspace, and one gentleman asked, what is the equivalent of the planning and analysis workspace in the new version?
That, I'm guessing it must be a Civil 3D workspace. I honestly don't know what Civil 3D would have built in as default. I'm not a Civil 3D user. I don't know if there is an equivalent or if that's something you are going to have to create from scratch, have to make a custom workspace. But if you would like to send an email in to our info at CAD-1.com, we can send that to Brian Haley, and he could give you a more definitive answer on that. I apologize, though. I am not a Civil 3D user, so I can't answer that directly. Or I assume that's a Civil 3D workspace.
Yeah, I think so. All right, and one last question here. Quick access toolbar. I add my current layer, current line type, current dimension style, but I can't seem to find a way to add current color or current text style.
To the quick access toolbar, add your current layer, current line type. So what you're saying is you're adding your layer drop down. That's you know what, I forget to point that out. I've seen a few users who've done that, and that's also a really nice, a great use of the quick access toolbar to add your layer. It doesn't appear that it will allow you to set any of the properties, though. Well, let's see. There's line type and line weight, but apparently that's interesting. There's no way to add the current color to the quick access toolbar. I had not tried to ever add those. I typically do not change the current color, layer, or line type. I usually use by layer, but so I'd never attempted that. But thanks for pointing out. That's something we'll have to look into and see if perhaps that's something. It might just be what we sometimes refer to as an undocumented feature. Really, what I mean is there's a glitch there that we should submit under support. That's something you can also submit at the website. You know, offhand I can't recall what the Autodesk website is or the email address, but we certainly can submit that and see if there's a way that we can add that, since one of our clients is requesting that information. So I apologize, I don't have an answer for you. Apparently that is that's not possible. That's interesting. I'm gonna investigate that a little bit. All right. Let's see. We're talking about the quick access toolbar. Another new feature which was added in and I apologize because since I've worked in several versions, I tend to forget exactly which release some of these features were introduced. So sometime in the last couple years, AutoCAD introduced the quick access, I'm sorry, not quick access, they introduced the autocomplete. It's technically called auto append in AutoCAD. The autocomplete and the suggestion list, if you are using the dynamic input here at your crosshairs, it shows up on screen. If you've turned off dynamic input, let me do that real quick, it will still show up here on your command line. As you start to type commands, we get this window popping up, and it does have auto append, so it's trying to finish your sentences or finish what you're typing. Once you get to a certain point, it says, well, LIN, you probably mean line. It goes ahead and adds the E there. You can see highlighted in blue, and then you can just hit enter and it'll accept that as the command. It also now gives you the suggestion list. So when I type just L, I'm getting here on my command line, the shortcut, actually it'll show you whenever you type a letter or two letters, it always defaults. If those letters represent an alias for a command, it will show those first in the list. It'll default to those, and you can just hit enter. But what's nice, and this also happens on your dynamic input, what's really nice is that it also gives you a list of other commands which start with that letter or letters. This can be nice if you're using one of those really long system variables you wanted to type. I tend to forget sometimes some of those less often used system variables. And you can scroll through this list and go find those additional commands and variables and then select them from the list. Now that's great. I use these a lot because because I'm kind of in there. A lot of times I'm searching for a lot more stuff than the average user because I'm doing tech support. The average person day to day, there might be just a few 50 or 100 of the commands that you just know right off the bat. You know the aliases and the shortcuts. You know to type all those. You don't want that functionality kind of interrupting your view here on the screen. We can control those auto append. We have options for the auto append and for the suggestion list. And there's a couple ways to access those settings. One of which right here on screen, or the easiest to see right away, is this wrench on the command line now. Make sure not to hit the X because that hides your command line. Click the little wrench down here where it says Customize, and you'll get this list of options. You have input settings, and there when you hover on that, you get the additional list. We get autocomplete and autocorrect. Actually, that's new to 2014. It will actually try to if you type LNIE or something, it tries to correct you and understands the command. You can tell it whether or not to search system variables to display those. You can actually search right from the command line now. I haven't actually done a lot with that at this point. I haven't had a chance to really experiment with it. You can also set the delay time right here. So if you uncheck any of these, you click on them, it'll uncheck them, and your autocomplete will get turned off. There's also this delay time option. So right now it's set to, I guess this is set to 300. It used to be set to tenths of a second, so I'm not really sure if that's a units thing. I'm going to have to check here. Let's see if I switch to architectural. I'm not really sure why that's, I've never discovered that or never noticed that. Under delay time, apparently they've switched the units of measurement, so now it's set to 300, what would that be, I guess it's still 3/10 of a second, so let me just try 700. And actually, let me set it even longer. I'll set it to 1,000. Let's see what that does. So now what it should do, you see when I type L, you see it waited a full second. It used to be just in seconds and tenths of a second. I'll have to see what those units exactly are. I guess those would be, what are those? Thousandth of a second is that a nanosecond? Anyway, now it waits longer. I type L, you saw it waited. Let me escape out of that and do it one more time. I type E, wait. When the second elapses, then it pops open the suggestion list. So for those of you who maybe are used to typing or comfortable typing 99.9% of your commands, there's those system variables we don't use very often, and sometimes you're thinking, well, was it, we can't quite remember the syntax, or we don't really remember how it went. This is a great way to still gain access to the suggestion list, yet not have it interrupting your typical workflow. So that was and in the 2013, this is 2014, when you click on this, there'll be other tools, and you can also select there and go to the options here. Let me cancel that. This will look a little bit different when you go in one of the earlier versions, 2013. You can also right-click in the command line. You see there's input settings, and you can change some of these features here as well. So that's auto append and suggestion list. I added this into the list too as well because some of you might be using, I know I get quite a few people throughout the year actually that come in for training, for basically update training. They're switching from, say, 2007 or 8, maybe they're jumping to 2010. A lot of organizations are still, they like to remain a few versions behind to make sure that all the glitches have been worked out and they're not having to roll out service packs and that kind of thing. In 2009 and I believe in 2010, when you first start AutoCAD, when you launch your drawings, when you open a drawing, you're going to go down here and you're going to discover that your layout tabs are missing. Notice down here, I actually closed mine to demonstrate what this is going to look like. Down here, there's no layout tabs, and the reason they did this is because in those versions they had just introduced this new feature called Quick Access Layouts, and they wanted to kind of introduce or encourage people to go and use these things for switching among layouts. A lot of us are used to these or familiar with these, but I still I'll admit, I still prefer the layout tabs. I want to see them listed across here at the bottom. I don't want to have to click extra buttons to get a little thumbnail view unless that's really what I want. When your layout tabs are not displayed, what you do get displayed instead is this little icon down here, this little black square, and when you hover on that, it's going to say model space. What this is doing is indicating the paper space versus model space, whichever space you are currently viewing. So if I were to switch to one of these layouts, it'll highlight then the layout. You see the little layout tab or little layout button right here turns blue, and I had to click this little button right here to switch back into model space, or you could type your MSPS as we used to. But most of us prefer those layout tabs. I'll go ahead and say I think most people prefer the layout tabs. I get so many questions about it. So what you need to do is come down here and right-click on that little black icon and say Display Layout and Model Tabs. I'll also point that out because I have, I taught something like 200-something AutoCAD students last year, and throughout that time, just people somehow here and there managed to accidentally close the layout tabs, and that's the quickest way to restore the layout tabs here, is to right-click on that little black icon which appears. You notice that black icon no longer displays here. You can also do this through the Options dialog box. You can turn on your layout tabs. You'll notice, though, now also, let me do something else. Let me go ahead and open, let me see what I have here. Do I have any? Okay, well, I don't have anything really quickly. Let me just start a new drawing from just a blank template, just so I have more than one file open. This is a new feature of 2014, and I'm still, this is one of those things up here at the top. This is one of those things that when it first got introduced, it was kind of like, well, yeah, whatever. I'm probably not going to use that. I use it all the time now, actually. After just a few hours using these features, I started to really like this, and I was talking to Brian Haley about this as well, and he said the same thing. He didn't think it was going to be very useful or be a big deal, and he uses these tabs all the time. What 2014 gives us now are drawing tabs. Down here at the bottom we have layout tabs for the current drawing, but at the top we can use these tabs right here to switch among the multiple drawings. We can also click the little plus sign and create a new drawing right from there. And what's cool about this is this will actually save these little tabs. They do give us a little information. Notice right there, these both have a little asterisk. This is telling me I have unsaved changes in that drawing, which is just a nice little piece of information. You can right-click on those tabs, and it gives you a set of features there. You know, we use right-click so much in AutoCAD now; it's become very right-click, shortcut menu dependent. There's new and open and save as, so you can access some of those tools. You can also click, of course, the little X and close one of those drawings, and it will always prompt you, do you want to save changes? So this is even, like I said, it's one of those things that I did not expect I would find that useful, and now I find myself using all the time because the main thing is that it gives me the name of the drawing right there. And then you also notice when you hover, it gives you basically the same functionality as Quick View Drawings does. It gives you the little thumbnails right here. You can go directly to Model Space, takes a second, Model Space or one of the layouts. And when you hover on those, it will preview each of those layouts. I'm not sure why it's not previewing. Oh, I guess layout 2 and layout number 1 are basically identical. So nice little functionality. If you don't like that, though, if you think it takes up too much space, it does take up another certain number of pixels right here of your drawing space. Maybe you're working on a smaller monitor. If you come to the View tab here on the ribbon, so I clicked on the View tab, you'll notice over here there's a user interface panel, and right there we have file tabs, and it's blue. That means it's on. If I click on that, it will hide those file tabs. It's that easy to turn them on and off. Maybe you want to just be able to toggle them on and off quickly because some days you need them, some days you don't. That's the quickest way to access those. I guess I didn't look. My guess is in the options dialog box there's probably a toggle for that as well. There's most likely a command file tab that you can type here. If you're using menus, I guess I can show that. A lot of people don't realize that they can, if you right click on the quick access toolbar, you can actually nope, sorry, not right click. If you click the drop down on the quick access toolbar, you can show the menu bar, and you'll see there is also a view tab or a view drop down menu now. And I'm looking, I never use this, so I'm not sure in here. Toolbars, they're under display maybe? I guess it's somewhere in here that there's an option for your file tabs. I'm probably looking right at it and not seeing it, but there's likely in here in one of your drop-down menus the same features. I'm going to hide the menu bar because I don't use that. Okay, so that's a new 2014 feature. These file tabs here at the top. That's probably the most obvious on-screen update to AutoCAD.
Michael, we have another quick question that
Okay.
jumped in here. Does 2014 LT have a batch plot feature? So, a little side note from more directed to the LT version of 2014. But.
I honestly can't say. I have not installed or experimented with 2014 LT directly. I thought that I guess what I might point out is that in the newer versions of AutoCAD, that the batch plot is now called Publish. So what I'll recommend is that you can either go to the application menu, and you'll see here that there is a Publish tool, or if you're using the ribbon and you go to the Output tab of the ribbon, you will see it listed as Batch Plot here. In the newer versions of AutoCAD, I honestly don't know when they switched to the Publish tool and completely did away with Batch Plot. I've been using the Publish tools for a number of years, probably since 2006 at least. And it does basically the same thing as Batch Plot. It gives you a lot of robust features for gathering up multiple drawings. So it's Batch Plot. So anywhere that you see the term Batch Plot or the term Publish, they refer to this exact same tool called Publish. They did keep the term Batch Plot here on the ribbon, but in other places you'll see it as Publish. So take a look in your LT and see if it does, in fact, have the Publish tool. It might function a little different than you're used to, but yeah, take a look for that there. And if it doesn't, then I'd kind of be surprised. I have never seen that as one of the limitations of the LT. Just so you know, that the LT does stand for Limited Technology, is the technical. That's what a lot of people call it light. It actually stands for Limited Technology, and that's why they go in and disable a few of those features because it's it's supposed to be a lighter, smaller version of it, more affordable in general.
Another question here.
Okay.
Someone asked if they could turn the view cube off and leave it off.
No. Yes and no. How's that? That's what I always say.
Great. All right, next question.
And on the View tab, and this will be the same in the previous versions as well, you'll go to the View tab of the ribbon. under this user interface drop-down button here, you'll see that there is a view cube check mark. Here's what's funny about this is that if you turn this off, let me go ahead and create another new drawing here. I'll just use the AutoCAD template. Notice my view cube is back. If I switch back and forth between those, you can turn it off and leave it off in that drawing. So what this means is that what you want to do, if you only do 2D drafting, you're not using the view cube, you need to go into your company template, open up the template, turn off the view cube in the template, because if it's on in the template, every file you create from that template going forward will have the view cube turned on. This is a per drawing setting. Why? I honestly can't say. I guess it's because sometimes people work both in 2D files and 3D files, and you want to be able to control it per file rather than globally. As I am sure a lot of you feel, I would prefer to see it globally. If I turn off the view cube, it's off always. If I turn it on, it's always on until I turn it back off again. Unfortunately, it is not. It's per drawing. If anybody has a way of doing that more globally, please let me know. I've not found one anywhere. But you go to the View tab, User Interface, uncheck View Cube right here, and it will turn off for that drawing. So again, do this in your template. If you're not using a template, anybody who's listened to any of my webinars or attended any of my classes in the past will know I'm always going on and on about make a template. Your company needs a template. Turn off that View Cube if you don't need it in those files. It's a great question, and it was actually part of my next line item on my list here was taking a look at this View tab a little bit more in depth, and that was one of the features I want to show is that you can turn off the View Cube. Great timing, by the way. It's almost like somebody put them up there, which I didn't, I swear. You can also turn off the navigation bar from here. For whatever reason, they gave us on the navigation bar, that's this thing over here on the side, there's a little tiny X. We can close the navigation bar by clicking that tiny, 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 tiny little button right there. So we can close it there, and this is global, but you notice then I can do it from the user interface right there, navigation bar. I can turn it on and off from this check mark. There's also a show motion. These are mostly for 3D modeling, or actually show motion is. It basically will let you navigate through and record your motions through a 3D workspace or 3D environment. There's also the ability to turn on the text window. Of course, we can do that with the F2 command, or the F2 key as well. That's the default. So for whatever reason, they decided that that should be part of this user space interface. There is also access to different toolbars, so if you wanted to turn on certain particular work toolbars that you use frequently, I don't know, let's try draw. You can turn on some of those work toolbars over here, and again, it allows you to sort of hybridize your workspace so that you can both have the ribbon and maybe one of the toolbars which you're accustomed to working with if you've typically in the past worked with toolbars. But you can do that from here on this View tab. You can come in and, of course, uncheck them and turn these off. We also have tools here on this user interface panel for tiling our windows. It's not something I used to do very often, but now there's a button right here on the ribbon. I try to take advantage of this a little more frequently. You have tools for tiling windows vertically and horizontally right here. You can also cascade if you're using more than one, if you have multiple files, you can cascade these, and this is one way that you can switch among your different files. You can also then you can access your switch windows tool here. So that's just one of the, I don't know, 8, 10 ways that we have for switching among multiple files, which the tabs is another one they've added this year. And there's also a palettes panel here, so you can turn off a lot of your palettes from here as well. So depending on the type of work you do, if you use Sheet Set Manager, if you use Tool Palettes, the Properties Palette, Design Center is access through here. So a lot of those things that are typically grouped into palettes can be turned on and off from this panel here on the ribbon as well. A lot of these other tools that we're pretty familiar with, they've been around before. They've just lumped them together under View. And these are all tools mostly regarding your user interface and model space. In 2013, be aware that they did add in this layout tab to the ribbon, and this is now where they've moved. If you go, let me go to Paper Space. This is where they have moved the viewports tools for creating paper space viewports. They used to reside on the View tab. 2012 and prior, they were on the View tab of the ribbon. 2013, they moved them over to this Layout tab, along with adding in views, tools for creating 2D views, two-dimensional views of 3D modeling. So this Create Views is kind of a cool feature if you're doing 3D modeling, but I'm not going to get into that at this time. I just wanted to let everybody know your Layout Viewports panel is now on the Layout tab of the ribbon. All right, so another feature that we have here, these are little tips and tricks, just kind of pointing out some of the tools we have available. A lot of people, when AutoCAD switched to these little icons here on the status bar, I had a difficulty. I think 2009 was when they switched to these icons. It took me a little bit of time to learn what they all do. It's all tools that I've used for the most part. I can toggle on and off my ortho and toggle on and off the grid and various tools, O-snaps. And we've done that before using F keys. That was pretty straightforward in the early days that we used our F keys. Later on then what they give us was a little list of text down here. For some reason in 2009, I guess they just went to a more graphically oriented workspace, they switched to all these icons down here. I know what they all do just by looking at them now. Just, you know, we're all familiar with buttons. However, you might not like those. If you could see this on my laptop right now, you'd see these icons because my laptop monitor is it's a pretty high resolution. These buttons are really tiny. Oh, let me move that away. Those buttons are really small. I might prefer, if I was using this a lot, to right-click on one of those tools, one of those buttons, and you'll notice there's this option that says Use Icons, and it's checked. If I uncheck that by just clicking on it again, you'll see it switches back to the text displays that we had for a number of years. Some of the new features you might not realize or recognize. Selection cycling is just shown as SC. Annotation monitor is shown as AM, and there's these other ones. So there's our ortho, polar, and O-snap. A lot of people request this as well. How do I get my little piece of text back? I can recognize polar much more quickly than I can recognize the O-snap icons or something like that. But if you want to bring those back, right-click again and reselect Use Icons, and it shows us. It doesn't take any more space really vertically, so that's up to you, whichever way you like to display those.
Michael, I do have a quick question
Okay.
here. Going back to the navigation bar, can you move it?
Can I move the navigation bar? You should be able to. Let me verify. I can move it. Yeah, maybe not. I can drag it away, but it looks like it wants to automatically dock. So I can, yes, relocate it, but it wants to automatically dock to the edge of my screen, it appears. And I'll admit that for myself, I turned off that navigation bar almost immediately once it was introduced because I tend to use my mouse scroll wheel to do my panning and zooming. But if you are going to use it, if you're doing 3D modeling, there's some nice orbiting tools. The only time I actually turn on the navigation bar and use these steering wheels for the most part for the 2D realm is if I ever go on to I go off-site, go out of my office, and I've forgotten my wireless mouse. It's actually only happened to me once, but I got it to do a demonstration, and I discovered I'd left my mouse back here in the office, and I'm sure many of you have tried this. If you try to navigate using the trackpad on your laptop, it's very frustrating. So I'll tend to use some of these tools. So I'll turn navigation back on, navigation bar back on. It appears that if you hover here at the very top, maybe, why is it not doing it now? Well, I got it to do it once. Let's see. Oh, and then of course I can come to the bottom. I forgot there's another tiny little icon there at the bottom. And I clicked on that before to see what it did. Now I guess it's been so long since I used it, I've forgotten. We have that ability to click that little button, and you'll see there's this docking positions option. And when you hover on that, you can choose different options here. And if I uncheck Link to View Cube, that should give me a little bit more ability to move it around. But it still apparently wants to dock into the workspace. I can click to place it there, but it doesn't orient itself. So it's sort of movable, I'll say. Not exactly the best, but we can maybe move it to the left side of the screen or the bottom, or kind of get it from being right there in the middle right-hand side if necessary. All right, so another thing I should cover, I wanted to talk about real quick here, are these things up here in the top. You might have noticed these a few versions ago. Anybody who's ever worked in 3ds Max doing rendering, you would have recognized these. They look exactly the same in 3ds Max. These are called in-canvas view controls, or in-canvas controls. What these give you is the ability to have right here in your drawing area, and I'm going to close this palette because you can see it's kind of, I keep bumping it. We can actually come in here, and if you hover here where it says top, you can click on that button, and this is going to let you choose different views, the predefined views of your 3D workspace. You have your top, bottom, left, right, front, and back. So again, this is for 3D modeling, and you have your isometric views. The same as, these are giving you access to the exact same tools which are on this views panel here. If you're in the 3D modeling space, you'll also have a views panel on your home tab. But you can access these different, this is nice to go back to the top view if you have orbited out of that view. You can also switch between parallel and perspective. Again, if you're doing 3D modeling, those are the only reason you really have to worry about those. You can also click where mine says 2D wireframe and switch visual styles, which is again the same exact list as you would have on the visual styles panel of the view tab in basic AutoCAD. If you are in 3D, Civil 3D, I know these kind of tools are located in different places, but right there we have the in-canvas controls. I've started using these pretty frequently when I'm doing 3D modeling in AutoCAD. I tend to gravitate towards these controls right here because even when I'm on the, say, I'm going to switch to my 3D modeling workspace, blink for a little bit. Oftentimes I'm on one of these other tabs on the ribbon, like the solid tab, and then if I want to switch to maybe shades of gray or some other visual style, I could either switch to the home tab, or I can stay on that ribbon tab and click the drop-down list and select from one of these other visual styles right here without having to change the ribbon I've got displayed. And now that I think about it, I believe I forgot to double check this. I believe you can turn off the in-canvas controls. It's probably through the options dialog box. I forgot to verify that before the start of the webinar. But if you don't like that in there, pretty much, we've realized pretty much everything is customizable. So we refer to those as the in-canvas controls. The last thing I wanted to cover here, if there aren't any more questions, we've got plenty of time for questions here. The last thing I want to take a quick look at, I don't have time to go in depth here very much, but I did want to mention that just to show this, we do have the ability now, and we can definitely, we get into the CUI a lot in our AutoCAD Advanced class. In this customized user interface, I typed CUI to access this. This is now where we can go, well, we've always been able to go, but a lot of people haven't spent any time in here because it's a little bit intimidating, but in here now we have a lot of controls for customizing pretty much anything about our user interface. When you come in here, you're going to see that we have options here for customizing our workspaces even more in depth than just by selecting different workspaces here and moving things around. We have the ability to create additional quick access toolbars and have them display when we change our workspaces up here. You have the ability here when you expand the ribbon to come in here and change and create custom panels and custom tabs for your workspace. And this is something that we can help you with. If you decide that you need a panel that either combines maybe a lot of the different tools that are available on different panels and different tabs, you want a custom panel that shows 6 or 8 of your most commonly used tools, you want to create a custom tab for your company that uses some of your special commands and custom tools that you have created for your use, you can do this through the customized user interface. And it's actually not too bad once somebody's walked you through. But you see I can right-click on panels and add a new panel right here. I can then grab commands from this lower section down here and add them to this new panel. I can also add new tabs to my ribbon. I can right-click here when I expand out ribbon. I can right-click on tabs and say new tab, and it will add in this new tab. It will allow me to customize it. And then there's several steps, and we have to add this to our workspaces. You have to add that to the ribbon on your workspaces. But I just want to point out that it is possible to customize the ribbon. I think that encourages. I know Denny and Jennifer are some of our techs that you're probably, many of you have spent time with on the phone, have walked through the process with some of our clients because they want to use the ribbon, but a lot of the tools that they'd customized for their use in the past reside currently on toolbars. So now we can actually use the customized user interface to create custom tabs on the ribbon, add custom panels to those tabs, and then add our own custom tools to each of those panels. That is achieved and accessed through the customized user interface. You can also create custom toolbars in here. And I want to say that there used to be yep, there it is. If you do have a toolbar which displays in here, which doesn't currently have a panel associated with it for the ribbon, you can also expand the toolbars node here on the tree. And you'll see that there's an option when you right-click on one of those toolbars to copy it to a ribbon panel. So if you needed to move one of these special toolbars that by default doesn't show up in the ribbon, you can migrate it over using this right-click method. And then you'll have to go through several steps to add those then to the workspace. But it is possible, and it's actually not very bad. It's not too hard to achieve that.
We do have a question that came in
Okay.
here, is if we're going to upgrade from 2011 to 2014, are we safe by just saving our workspace, or do we need to save our profiles so that the update is flawless?
You know, if Denny's listening, Denny and Jennifer typically recommend when migrating, and you know, there's different trains of thought or different schools of thought on migrating profiles forward and migrating customized user interfaces forward. You know, so a lot of times it's preferred to just maybe start over when you go to a new version, especially if you're hopping multiple versions like that. If you migrate an old ARG file forward, that's your profile, you might end up, you know, it might not have accounted for some of the new features which have been introduced. Same with the CUI. If you migrate an old CUI forward, you could end up causing a little bit of an issue. So, and we actually have seen instances where a newer version of AutoCAD, someone will call and say, well, there's a glitch, something doesn't seem to be working right. And occasionally it's tied to somebody having migrated an older ARG or older CUI X file forward from multiple versions back. You know, we've been looking here this last hour, a lot of new features which have been introduced in the last few years. So those probably aren't part of or may not be part of your 2011 CUI and your 2011 profiles. So, you know, you want to be cautious about migrating those forward in general. And I guess the big operative word there, the key word we want to look at there is the term flawless. I don't think anybody in the tech support business would like to, we try to avoid terms like that just because, you know, it's software. It's a very big piece of software. It is also interacting with other pieces of software now, depending on if you're installing it as a standalone or if you're installing it as part of a suite. You end up with a lot of different functionality that's going to be introduced, and using older versions of your different customizations can oftentimes interfere with some of those new features which are introduced in the new suites, the packages that you purchase. So certainly if you're going to try using some of those, I would do it as a limited test. Give it a shot, try it out, take a look and see if there's anything that doesn't seem to be behaving as it should. And if you have any specific questions, if there's like a specific tool that you guys have or a group of tools that you would like to migrate forward, we can assist you in getting those things migrated properly in that CUI. There is a process for transferring here. You'll see there's a tool here, and this is what the typical recommendation is, to not actually transfer here the entire ACAD.CUIX. This is the file that contains all this information. Don't ever just migrate that thing forward. The ideal situation is to actually take the old CUIX here on one side and drag some of, say, your toolbars or your ribbon tabs or something, drag them over into your new CUIX and just pull through those features rather than overriding the entire ACAD CUIX wholesale. That's when we start to see some goofy stuff and some new features that get eliminated because they weren't part of the old CUIX in 2011 or 10 or 9, something prior. So ideally, you would transfer your standards and your features across, and then you would do that before you do your deployment, and then send everything out so that everything gets migrated for the entire company using those features. And we can certainly give you some better information if you would like to give us a call. We can walk you through that. All right, so the last thing I did want to talk about really quickly before we wrap up, in the more recent versions of AutoCAD, again, we also have this thing up here. A lot of you might actually notice in yours, if you've not taken advantage of this feature, let me go ahead and sign out of this. When you start AutoCAD, you're going to notice that button up here. It's going to say sign in. It's got this little head and shoulders icon. If you click on that drop down, if you've never used this, you can go down here and select this sign in to Autodesk 360. What this is going to give me access to is some of the new cloud computing options and features which Autodesk is providing to, well, they're providing it to everybody. At the very least, even if your particular license of AutoCAD is not on subscription, Autodesk is providing 5 gigs of free storage on the cloud, on their servers. So this is going to be sort of comparable to the way that Dropbox provides free, certain amount of free web hosting or file hosting, and Box, and I believe if you're using Gmail now you have Google Drive. You've got all these features out there. All these companies that are providing free online storage. Autodesk has gotten in the game. So again, everybody gets at least 5 gigs. Some places you'll see it listed as 3, but I believe it's now 5 gigs. If you are on subscription, you get up to 25 gigs of online storage, and that is a lot of AutoCAD files. So when you start this, if you haven't yet created an Autodesk account, you're going to have to click this Need an Autodesk ID link right here. But otherwise, you can sign in, and that's my email address if anybody was looking to get in touch. And luckily, you can't see my password here. I'll sign in. What this allows me to do, the one feature, since we're talking about the user interface, the one thing I wanted to show is that when you click now, you see it shows my name up here. We have this online options. Actually, well, let me look at the very top here. It says sync my settings with the cloud. What this lets you do is actually take your, now I forget, I believe it saves your ARG, your profile, and your workspace. It will actually let you sync those settings up to the Autodesk servers, which, by the way, are actually hosted on the Amazon cloud. They're pretty open about that, if anybody's wondering about how that all happens. But anyway, this lets you save these settings up to the cloud. When you then sit down at another computer, maybe you're between your desktop and your laptop or other stations in your company, you can then pull down. You can log in with your Autodesk ID through this feature, and you can pull down your settings to that installation of AutoCAD, to the AutoCAD on that particular machine. So if you've logged in, it'll save it under your profile for that machine, and you'll get your settings as you're accustomed to seeing them on the computer from which you created your profile, and you've saved those. So you can sync right here. I'm not going to do that because it tends to it uses a lot of bandwidth immediately when it first starts this process, and I don't want it to bog down my go-to meeting session here. But that's a nice feature, and so I can do this, again, I can do this from a desktop to a laptop or whatever it might be. This also then gives you access to some of the cloud features. So like when you go to Save As, you'll see in 2014 it shows up like this, Autodesk 360, this little sort of infinite loop Mobius strip thing. In 2013 and prior, it's going to say, I think it says Autodesk Cloud, or the cloud has a little cloud icon. But this signing in through your Autodesk ID up here will let you save files then from within this. It will let you save those to the cloud and pull them down in other places, grant other people access to those. I'm just going to say in the future, in the near future, you're going to start hearing a lot. You probably already have started hearing a lot. If you guys are following any of our newsletters and any of the information, any of the, what am I looking for? What's the term I'm looking for? Any of the updates and all the various information feeds, Twitter and Facebook for Autodesk and CAD-1 and all the different organizations involved here, you're going to see a lot of information about the cloud in the near future. So we'll probably start doing webinars on that. A lot of the new features which Autodesk is introducing are going to be web-based, and this Autodesk 360 is sort of the unifying name for all of those new features. It's sort of the umbrella under which these features are being held, and actually that's what the talk tonight, one of the features that will be spoken about tonight will be some of this cloud computing technology coming up.
We did have a last question come in, and this is a good one here. Will AutoCAD 2010 be able to open 2014 save files?
It will not. So historically, the way AutoCAD has worked is that when you save a file, well, let's see, when you upgrade AutoCAD, AutoCAD will play nice. It will open files directly across from other versions for about 3 years in a row. And it has been 3 years. So you see here when I go to Save As, this is the easiest place to show this. We see here that the default, I'm in 2014, but it's saying AutoCAD 2013 is the file format. Your extension, DWG, remains the same, but AutoCAD 2013 and AutoCAD 2014 and 2015, we're assuming, those should all play nice together if you just go ahead and hit the Save button. If you're using 2010, 11, or 12, if somebody sends you a 2013 or 14 file, you won't be able to open it. And you notice here, so it skips. It goes 10. So 10, 11, and 12 will all play nice together. 2007, 8, and 9 all play nice together. But if somebody's using a newer version of AutoCAD, they will have to do a Save As and save that file back to an older version so that you will be able to open it in 2010. They'll have to choose here, Save As, Files of Type, AutoCAD 2010 right here, or prior. Files are always forward compatible, so if you were the one at 14 and somebody was sending you any of the older versions, they will always open in the newer version. It will prompt you, though. Typically, they'll say, this was saved in an older version of AutoCAD. Saving it now will save it as the newer version. So this is a good feature to be aware of. It's something to be aware of. Every 3 years, AutoCAD updates the file format, so that is the kind of the code to which the file is saved, and you'll have to save back to an older version. While we're on the subject, I'll just go ahead and introduce this real quick. If you go to the Options dialog box on the Open and Save tab, you'll notice that there is the ability, though, to kind of more or less permanently set the file format which AutoCAD saves to. So this is a great feature if your office is leapfrogging your users. Maybe everybody every 2 years is jumping two versions ahead, or half the office jumps ahead and the next half changes the next year. You can come in here and permanently set so that if I set this to 2010, whenever I hit the Save button up here, save my drawings, it will default back to the older 2010 version. So, and I know a lot of companies out there are doing that. They have half their staff on one version, half the staff, or some combination on a different version. And when you hit those third years where the file format changes, this is going to be necessary so that everybody can work together without having to remember to save as. You can also do that through eTransmit, which would be you can save back to older versions, but that's a subject for another webinar.
All right, and last question here is, this is how we were ending as well, is yes, this is being recorded, and we do plan to add this to our CAD-1 YouTube channel. I'm not sure how long it does take to get prepped to get back to the channel, but we do have a lot of our webinars that we have done recently. They're recorded and posted to our YouTube channel.
So if you go to our homepage, CAD-1.com, you'll notice right over here, hey, where'd it go? Right over there, there's a link to our YouTube channel. So go ahead and click on that. I'll say we've been pretty good. Denny's been pretty good about getting our webinars uploaded to our YouTube channel within a few days, assuming everything processes properly. We are recording this. Sometimes it takes a little bit of, you have to jump through a few hoops to get it to the proper format. But you can view this later, and be sure to tell your coworkers about it if they weren't able to attend, if they're interested in any of these. So that's everything we have for today. Remember to check our website, CAD-1.com, for future events, future webinars. We're always looking for future topics as well. We do have pretty much the rest of the year scheduled out, but we also have our AutoCAD answers every other month, so feel free to tune into those and ask other questions as time goes by. as you develop more questions. And those are the AutoCAD answers is pretty free form. Anything you want to ask about, Jennifer and I will try to answer your questions.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in one of our next webinars.
Bye, everyone.